Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Chief of Staff Show. Today I've got Lerida joining with us. So Lerida, if you could just introduce yourself and tell us about how you got into the Chief of Staff role.
Hi everybody, and hi Melanie. Thanks so much for inviting me to this awesome show. My career started at a family business. We were a sourcing and procurement firm, which is really where I got my exposure to working with different IPs and different IP owners, their design systems, approval processes, and style guides. Growing up, I've always loved manga, anime, and games. So eventually, I became the country manager for Pokemon in the Philippines, managing one of the most loved brands. I mean, who doesn't know or love Pikachu or Eevee? After that, I became business strategy manager for one of the biggest esports organizations here in Southeast Asia. And as of 2 years ago, I joined VoyceMe, an anime and manga company, as their chief of staff. And it's been a really cool journey ever since. And we're working on releasing new content and exciting tech in the space.
That's incredible. I love how people are able to find chief of staff roles in industries that they're passionate about. So it sounds like going from working with Pikachu and Pokemon to still being in the anime and manga space. Is that something you've always been passionate about?
Anime and manga? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I grew up, tuning in on weekends to watch Pokemon, similar anime such as Doraemon, Inuyasha, and then I also love my Studio Ghibli. And then I remember how I would like save up my allowance to go to the bookstores and, collect manga. And because, I'm relying on a small student allowance, me and my friends who are also like anime and manga fans, we'd like collect and pool all our money together, and we like take turns to buy different releases and share a collection together. So yeah, it's been really cool, really fun to be able to call this a career now. Something that I considered a hobby and a very fun pastime.
Yeah, there's so many young people, especially who are really into gaming and to anime and all of those things. And it's cool to see that there are many different roles that you can take in that industry.
Yeah,
So, how
absolutely.
you mentioned going from biz strategy into this role, was it something that you applied for? Was it something they reached out to you? How did you go about getting this particular job?
So, it's been a while, so I'm trying to remember if this was something someone reached out or I applied. I remember I was applying and also taking calls from recruiters, but I believe for this role particularly, I reached out to the CEO and I applied. And so, quite interestingly, when I was hired, I became the first full time employee. So, employee number one at VoiceMe. So the last 2 years, we've been working together, the CEO and I, to scale the company from 200 people. It's been very cool and securing meaningful funding from top tier investors in this space. Some of our investors are behind really popular brands such as Netflix, Marvel, and Roblox. So yeah, that's how
Wow,
I got
that's
into
really
this space. Yeah.
I love when I see that chiefs of staff come in as like employee number one, employee number two, when they're part of the early founding team. It's so incredible when I see those CEOs that have that vision. They
Yeah.
know that, hey, I need this person now. Like I
Yeah.
need someone who can help execute my vision.
Mhm.
Sometimes there are CEOs that have never heard of a chief of staff. They're not sure when to get one. I'm always like, as soon as possible. As soon as possible, when you know that you have this vision, you have this great idea, there's too many in the weeds details, there's too much execution that needs to happen. The CEO needs to be like heads up, looking at the future, and they need their chief of staff heads down, making it happen. So that's really cool
Mhm.
that your CEO recognized that early on.
Yeah, totally. I mean, so chief of staff as an acronym is COS, and I read somewhere that that could also stand for culture, operations, and strategy, right?
Yeah.
So when you bring in a chief of staff early, you're also bringing in the foundations of your culture, operations, and strategy early too, and that way you can really get to work and build a pretty good foundation for the rest of the company to sit on top of. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so important. And it's really good to highlight that because, like I said, a lot of founders, CEOs, they think they need all these different things, but then they find themselves overwhelmed. Or they
Yeah,
might know that they need like an EA. That happens a lot, but they don't realize you really need that strategic thought partner, that chief of staff there.
for sure. I mean, after all, the name of the game as chief of staff, and I'm sure you know because you're a serial chief of staff yourself, is that we always have to maximize the CEO's impact. So when they bring us on board, it's very important to constantly go into every conversation or project thinking, how can I maximize the CEO's impact? So yeah, definitely, I resonate with that.
What have been some of the like cooler projects or things that you've worked on? Some of the more interesting ways that you've maximized your CEO's time?
That's a good question. Thank you for that. So one of the coolest projects that I supported and continue to support is a roadmap that was ideated by our product director. Their name is Elle. And so right now we're working on building a ethical generative AI tool that allows all users, no matter what level of art they have. I mean, if they could paint the Sistine Chapel like Michelangelo, or if they can only draw stick figures, no matter who you are, this ethical generative AI tool will allow you to create your own manga and comics. So yeah, so what makes it ethical is that we're only using content that has been explicitly given consent by the artist. So we're not like, scraping from the internet. So yeah, it's very cool. I know AI is a really big buzzword now, but we're really trying to carve our name in the space in a meaningful way. Yeah.
I love that. It sounds like you've done pretty well. I mean, going from 2 to 200 people and having those big name investors, it sounds like you're onto something. So that's always
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah.
How
Just
has that been taking the team from 2 to 200, knowing that, like you mentioned, the chief of staff, we're responsible for culture, operations, and strategy. So that, I mean, that's hard for anyone going from a company from 2 to 200. How's that been for you?
I think my secret ingredient, which I guess is not a secret anymore, since I'm sharing it on your show, is to hire other leaders, right? I think I read somewhere that you're not really a leader until you lead a leader who can also lead a leader.
I love
So,
that.
like, really maximizing that effect. So, right now, we've managed to build a really fantastic leadership team that I can rely on. And because I can rely and trust them, they're also bringing in other fantastic people to help lead their initiatives and work on pretty cool projects, yeah, for the company. So that's
That's
really how we scale from 2 to 200. 2 to 200 is bringing in people who are just as gritty and scrappy and hardworking and intelligent.
yeah. I love that. I love that quote about leaders. You're not a leader until you create a leader who can create a leader. It's a really
Yeah, yeah,
cool concept.
yeah,
And probably more leaders should hear that because some of them are not as well versed in that area. But it
yeah. I
sounds like
remember.
you have a really, really great leader.
Yeah, I remember seeing on your LinkedIn page that everything rises and falls on leadership, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna write that quote down because it's true. It's true. Everything does rise and fall on leadership. So that's how
Yeah.
we're building and sustaining the company.
Yeah, I like to say too, that's like the thermostat in your home. You know,
Mm,
the leader is the thermostat. So, like, if they're having a good day, if they're having a bad day, if they have a great mindset, a bad mindset, that's going to affect everyone else. There's a lot of people in the company that they don't have as big of an effect, but the
mm.
leader is really the thermostat. If they're turned up, excited, hardworking, they're going to encourage those same traits in others. But if they're the opposite, if they're discouraged, if they're frustrated, it's going to spread.
It's true. It's true. I was reading, I think it was a Harvard Business Review article somewhere that if the leader can model behavior necessary for positive change, the success of that happening increases 5 times if they model that behavior. If they don't, and it's simply like a verbal instruction, like, hey, I need you to work harder, or like, hey, I need you to be more strategic or in tune with our culture, da da da. But they're not modeling that same behavior. It's less likely that they will see the change they need to see in their organization. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you mentioned hiring a lot of leaders, and that's how you've helped scale from 2 to 200. The chief of staff role is really such a leadership role as well, but it really differs from the others, right? You might not have as large of a team reporting to you, or of course, it varies across all different types of companies. How does the chief of staff sort of function as a leader in your company?
I think I'm quite similar to a lot of other chiefs of staff, be it in government or corporate or startup, in that chief of staff doesn't really have their own department or their own function. They usually work across all departments and all functions, kind of like an owl where they have like 360-degree view of everything and they swoop in when they're needed. So that's what I do. I also act as a strategic and operational support for the CEO, who is my principal. And then I think what makes chiefs of staff pretty famous is that we tend to manage our own special projects that don't neatly fit into any one department or one function, but is still integral to the overall functioning of the company. So one example of that would be hiring really high level strategic leaders into the company that you can't really like simply outsource to someone or delegate to someone in the company. So that's one project that I am quite consistently on until today.
Nice. So with that being the case, what are some of the essential skills that you feel are really important for a chief of staff to have?
Well, aside from the obvious ones like strategic planning and operational planning, I think two qualities or two skills that are really important to have. One, having a really good sense of business economics, so that we can make really informed decisions that are aligned with the company's goals and the company's finances. The second one too is having a really good sense of humor, really good interpersonal skills. And I believe this is so important because you're talking to so many people across all departments, across all levels, right? From your senior leaders to your interns. So it's really good to sort of be a role model of the culture and the operational excellence and the strategic support that you want to see. So it's good. It's good to have a good sense of humor to keep things light, and that way people are more receptive when you're like telling them, "Hey, I need you to be more involved in this project." Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. I hadn't thought of that. And I think about the chief of staff role a lot. Hadn't thought about the sense of humor, but you're so right. It's really
Mhm.
needed, one, to help you just personally roll with the punches that come with the role, but also to help sort of get people. I always say, like, we as chiefs of staff, we need to have a lot of allies. We
Mhm.
have to lead by influence a lot. And so when you have that good sense of humor, you can also like get people on your team. They see that you're a good person. They want to be friends, and then you can help convince them, hey, here's why I need you to get serious or meet this deadline or, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, people are so much more receptive when you sort of approach them with sort of like positivity and like humor, where you're like, oh, this is a silly mistake, however, I see that you are trying your best, and haha, like I also made this silly mistake one time. Of
Mhm.
course, when the situation calls for it, there is a time to be serious and there is a time to be like stern and kind of be like an iron hand in a velvet glove. But I like to think that the sense of humor is the velvet glove over the iron hand, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I like that. You've got a lot
Yeah.
of great analogies. I'm writing them all down. Iron hand and a velvet glove. I like that.
Thank
That's a
you.
good
All those years of reading business books is paying off.
mix. Yeah. And that's important too. So it sounds like you're someone who's like a continual learner. Always, you mentioned reading the Harvard Business Review and different business books. Are there any things that stand out, maybe a certain publication or a certain book that you would recommend to chiefs of staff?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I really like Grit by Angela Duckworth. Have you read that one? Very
Yeah, that's
cool. There's also, I believe it's called Mindset by Caroline or Carol Dweck. Yeah.
Carol Dweck, yeah, mindset.
Yes, that one. Yeah. Sorry, it's been a while. Yeah, I would say, oh, the other one is, sorry, I'm like just remembering this. Is any one of Brene Brown's books. The most recent one was Atlas of the Heart. Really helps you kind of navigate emotions and emotional experiences. I really enjoyed that because emotions are a universal experience, no matter what situation you're in. And I always believe that if you can understand your own emotions and someone else's emotions, you are more likely to make a meaningful connection, collaborate.
And that's so important for chiefs of staff. I think, from my perspective, it's more so in our role than in other roles, like needing to have that sort of soft skill or the people skills to like understand people's emotions, understand where they're coming from, what their motivations are, what their hesitations are. When you can really understand that, you can be so much more effective and impactful at aligning them with the company's bigger vision. Yeah, there's a lot. I think people weigh too heavily on the hard skills. Like you need to know like finance and numbers and data. And it's like, no, what you really need to know are people skills, how to collaborate, how to facilitate effective meetings and conversations, and how to get people aligned and point people towards a vision. So I love those recommendations that, especially Brene Brown, I've read her personally, but never considered it professionally. But you're right. It's an important, aspect of it, the emotional aspect of the role.
For sure. I love her. I love her thesis that, authentic leadership rests on vulnerability. But there's also a way to be vulnerable where you're not like oversharing, over explaining, but kind of like just like meaningfully connecting with people by recognizing that I'm human and you're human too, using what you know and what you're skilled in. Here's what we can do using what I know and what I'm skilled in. And I think business strategy, as fancy of a title as it is, comes down to people strategy. Because if you don't have people buying into the strategy and executing it, then your strategy is not really very good because it's not getting executed. And I think a strategy is only really as good as it can be executed. Otherwise, it's just words on a paper.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. You need to have that buy-in or it's not going to happen. It's not going to get across the finish line. So
Yeah.
that being the case, though, knowing that this is, a people role, like you're dealing with people and different emotions, different motivations and mindsets. How do you navigate and manage conflicts that might come up?
So I'm not sure how common it is in bigger organizations. Probably not so common. But in startups like where I am in now, chiefs of staff sometimes have to wear the hat of HR on top of other hats. So as you know, part of HR is managing, negotiating, and resolving conflict. And I think what also adds to it in our case is that we're a global team. So we need to first and foremost prioritize cultural intelligence and pair it with emotional intelligence before we enter any sensitive conversations or open up any sensitive topics. I think that, and then we can do, the usual steps such as understanding the employee's background, assessing their situation, evaluating their performance, and then coming together and speaking about it like openly and transparently with the goal of resolving it together, and kind of like phrasing it in a way either using, I don't know, humor or relational experiences, stories, insights. But ultimately, the goal is it's you and me and the issue, not you versus me.
Yeah, that's such a great way to frame it.
Mm-hmm.
We're on the same team against whatever issue is going on.
Yeah.
Now, with all of that, being in that role of helping to solve problems and resolve conflict, you have to have a lot of credibility and trust built up just off the bat to even be able to effectively facilitate those conversations. What are some ways that you find to be effective as far as like building credibility and trust?
Well, okay, that's a good question. I prioritize, like I said, openness, honesty, transparency. I mean, we've all signed an NDA here, so let's just talk about it. Also, follow through on what I say I'll do. So I follow through on my commitments, and I just build up credit like you do with a credit card. I just make sure I'm not overcharging my credit card as a chief of staff. If I am unable to meet an obligation or an expectation, then I communicate in advance. I'll be like, sorry, I said I'll get it done by the end of the week. Can you give me, 2 to 3 more business days to get it done? And just be very like open to cooperating, collaborating with all my stakeholders. Yeah. And I find that when I model that behavior, that also makes people around me less anxious to hold themselves up to an impossible standard. And instead of creating a culture where everyone's like fearful to speak up or to say that they are unable to meet a deadline or provide a deliverable, we create a culture instead where everyone's like open and communicative, and providing solutions alongside whatever the issue is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. So, I mean, you've been doing so well, obviously. Your current company going from 2 to 200, and then your past experiences. Do you have any advice for people who want to become chiefs of staff? What would you tell them?
Oh, well, first of all, roll up your sleeves, wear your consultant hat, and get to work outside your comfort zone, right? Because you can't really grow unless you're outside your comfort zone. We know that. And then the other thing too is that if they are under a department head or a team leader, start volunteering to take on special projects, communicating on that leader's behalf, and working cross functionally, cross departmentally in their company, no matter what size it is, because this dynamic is actually very similar to a chief of staff and their CEO's business relationship. Yeah, really, really going into any, I guess, project, thinking, how can I maximize the impact of my manager? That way they can slowly build up to a chief of staff role.
Any other insights you would want to share with an aspiring chief of staff?
An aspiring chief of staff, what else should they know? I guess be very open to learning new things and expanding their knowledge in any and all areas. I really believe that if you just continue doing what you enjoy, your career will eventually align with what you love and what you enjoy. So yeah, just keep learning, keep applying, and keep volunteering to function like a chief of staff, even if you don't have that title officially yet. Yeah, I find that that's the common narrative. For example, executive assistants who become chiefs of staff, or managers for different functions becoming chiefs of staff. It's usually the people who are the ones who are raising their hands and being like, I can do it, I can speak on your behalf, I can lead this project on your behalf. Those are usually the ones that get shortlisted for the role.
Yeah. Yeah. So taking that initiative, and then also, like you're saying, volunteering for projects, making sure that you're writing them down, keeping track of those things so that whether you're proposing within your own company to be promoted to a chief of staff, or if you need to tailor your resume to apply for a role at another company, you have that list of, oh, yeah, 8 months ago I did this, and that was really a chief of staff type of responsibility. And so just keeping track of all those things too is really important.
Yeah, that's good advice, and I should start doing that. writing
Yeah,
down,
yeah.
writing down my achievements, no matter how small or big they are.
Yeah, you can even put in your email inbox, have a folder of like wins. And anytime, whether it's external and someone says, you did a great job, forward that email to that folder for yourself, or send an email and then just move it to that folder of like, okay, on this day I did this. And because a lot of times it's easy. We're doing so much and there's so much on
Yeah.
our plates. It's easy to forget all of those wins we really are having. And even if it's just to go back and like remind yourself and give yourself a pep talk, or if you want to use it to, suggest a raise or a promotion or apply for a role somewhere else, it's good to have that.
Yeah. And
Recorded.
I have a question for you. I hope you don't mind.
No, of course.
If you had to describe, in your experience, if you had to describe a chief of staff as any kitchen appliance or utensil, what would it be and why?
Oh, that is a really good one. Okay. The first thing that comes to mind is an air fryer because we do so much so quickly. And so I personally love my air fryer because it does so much so quickly. You can put all kinds of things inside an air fryer, desserts, breakfast, dinner, sides, and it's going to really quickly turn out something that's better than you ever expected. And so I think that's like the chief of staff. We're given tasks, and usually those tasks might have taken a long time, especially if our CEO had to do it with their limited bandwidth. But we take it, we quickly turn it around, and it's something better than they expected.
Yeah, and it's relatively good for you compared to other cooking methods.
True. That's a good point.
I love that. I'm going to borrow that answer.
Perfect. Yeah. Do you have a particular one that you consider the chief of staff to be?
I've changed my answer a couple of times. This is a popular question that we ask within our organization just to break the ice. I remember one of my first answers was I think I was a coffee machine because you just need one cup of me and you're out there getting the job done, and I'm there helping you with it. And I guess more recently I have been thinking, oh, like my role as the chief of staff has been feeling like I'm a pair of chopsticks because you can do so much with a pair of chopsticks. You can eat with it, you can cook with it, you can knit with it if your imagination allows you to, and you can even defend yourself with it. Yeah, if you get really, really creative. So
I love that. Multi-purpose.
Yeah, multi-purpose, much like an air fryer.
Oh, good. Well, I appreciate that question. That was a good one. I'm going to have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I had to ask you one good question because you've been asking so many good ones.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to add? Anything you'd like to leave people with?
Well, I have another question for you. So you're a CEO now. Congratulations, by the way. That's a really big role. So you're a CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. If you were to pick a chief of staff for yourself now, the CEO, what are some qualities or skills you'll prioritize and why?
That is a really great question and something I have been thinking about. It's very hard for me to pull myself out of the weeds. And so I would definitely want someone who can come in and just take care of all of the details so that I can focus on the higher level things, which that was so important to me in my chief of staff roles, was being able to enable my principal to work on higher level things. So I would love that. That's definitely on the top of my list. But another thing would be passion for what we're doing. And so that I think is really, really important and sometimes underrated. I have sometimes students and clients who are looking, they just apply for all the chief of staff roles that are open. And I'm like, are you passionate about this? Are you excited about this? Because if you're not, you're going to be miserable and you're not going to be as effective. And so it's really a waste of everyone's time. So definitely finding a chief of staff who's passionate about what we're doing in the world and really invested in moving that forward. So those would be my top two things.
Yeah, those are great. I love it. And I'll borrow it, one day if I ever become CEO or something.
Yeah. Do you ever think about what you might want to do next after chief of staff?
I really love my role a lot. I feel like it is a really good fit for my personality and my stage of life at the moment. I mean, I suppose I recently got promoted to director of business strategy and operations, but essentially I am still very much doing the same things as a chief of staff. So I suppose it's not so much of like what kind of title do I aspire to acquire, but more so like what other roles can I transfer my skills as chief of staff to. Yeah. So I think being a chief of staff is a really great way to sort of like incubate and grow your leadership skills, which is exactly what happened to you, which is how you became chief of staff to CEO. Yeah. We'll
Yeah.
see.
Yeah. I always tell people it really is a great launchpad career for sure, because you're seeing all of the different departments, you're having a top level view, you're really hands on. So it is great to see like where you might want to go next, but it shouldn't only be considered that. I would have been happy to stay a chief of staff my whole career. I really enjoy the role. I think a lot of us are really well suited to it because we want to be leaders, but we also want to be like sort of that supportive thought partner
Right.
role. So yeah, so it's really interesting how people can go from chief of staff to anything, or you can stay a chief of staff and it's going to be rewarding, no
Yeah.
matter what path you take.
Yeah, I relate to that very much. I do enjoy being a thought partner and a strategic support to my CEO right now.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on our show, and I look forward to following you on LinkedIn. I'll leave your LinkedIn link in the comments so that people can follow you and just continue watching your journey.
Thank you, and thank you for the lovely conversation. I hope to speak with you soon again.
Yeah, thank you.